Pickaxe.
Welcome to the Chance Encounters podcast. We've been operating board game cafes around the UK for about 6 years now. From hen do's to family do's, from first dates to last dates, we've seen it all and recommended a board game for it. But now we're looking for a fresh situation, a fresh challenge, as you will. Each week we'll invite a guest on who will come armed with an abstract and absurd scenario, and it's up to us to figure out what that situation calls for and recommend a game that will totally check their ultimate mate.
Wow.
Ultimate
Mega
checkmate.
Check their mate would have been great, but then
Wow,
you just
we should have really
added
gone
the
with that
ultimate.
one.
Yeah.
Well, too bad. We can't rewind now. Whichever game recommendation our guest loves the most will score a point, and at the end of the season, whoever has the most points will be scored the Titan of Board Games. Hello, I'm Richard Scarsbrook. I'm one of the co-founders of Chance Encounters, and I am really, really into like main characters in TV shows and various other bits, which means that whenever I play Pokemon, I have to have a Pikachu in my party, which also means I feel very bad when I inevitably power them up into a Raichu because it's a bit of a moral stain on my character, really. That I have to have the power. I'm like, Pikachu, I had you. Anyway. So I'm also joined with Ben this week.
Hello, I'm Ben. I work with the Yogscast. I do streaming and board games. I'm a massive nerd. And, wow, I have the courage of my convictions, sir. If I was going to include a Pikachu in my party, he would stay a Pikachu as the law demands.
That's true. Fair enough. I will hang my head in
I'm
shame.
very disappointed in you.
I'm sorry. And our guest guru for the week is Russ.
Hello, it's me again, Russell. I work for Chance Encounters. I do various things there, but I always feel bad evolving my Pokemon because I've grown to love them as they are, and essentially like just letting them change completely into a brand new sort of creature, and I just always feel really guilty about it. Does anyone else? I don't think I actually hate evolving them. I leave them the main way, like the main sort of stage for as long as possible.
I kind of get a Charmander so I can get a Charizard though.
Yeah, but like cute Charmander, like you
cute, it's just
can't
not as
evolve that.
My boy actually was so excited. He spent weeks and weeks and weeks trying to hunt down an Oddish.
Yeah,
And finally got one. And after his first battle, it evolved into whatever Oddish evolves into, and he was so upset. He was just like, I've waited for so long for this little guy, and now
Oddish
he's
is really
gone.
cute, and then you've got Gloom, who's just like really moody.
that's a analogy for a teenager. To be fair,
Yeah.
Oh no!
And our guest this week is Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt Thrower. I'm a board game journalist, and I have never played a Pokemon video game.
Really?
The only Pokemon I know were Bulbasaur, so I continually went about that and drove my kids mad with it until they named our dog after Pokemon Eevee. She looks like an Eevee.
That's really cute.
That
That's
is
a
a
great
good name.
It's a cute dog, but so now my knowledge of Pokemon evolutions has expanded to 2.
well, technically 7, so 8, right? Because it evolves into 6 different
Oh my god!
Pokemon.
I don't think Matt knows how to evolve Eevee. I think that's the issue here. Is that right?
No, I don't. I tried playing the Pikachu thing. No, it was the Eevee thing on the Switch.
Yeah.
Let's go
Didn't
Eevee.
get on with that's the one.
Yeah.
Didn't get on with it that well. So sadly, that dropped by the wayside. But my kids love them. So
Oh, nice.
Fair enough.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
It's been great. So, if anybody, you've done so many different board game columns and various writings. You've been very well rounded. So, thank you so much for taking the time out to come on here.
it's very much my pleasure. Yeah, I've worked all over the shop from the years from started out doing blog posts. Got a lucky break with the iPad, really. When board games first came to the iPad, there were people scrambling, editors scrambling to look for writers, and that's where I first got my toe in the door, as it were.
Oh, cool.
And I've just been lucky from there to, take my work to a lot of different video game sites. I feel it's a bit of a responsibility, really, because it's bringing tabletop to a bigger crowd, a wider crowd that are kind of primed for it to some degree, and I love it. I'm really
Like an ambassador.
I hope. Well, that's a bit
Extolling the virtues of the traditional tabletop.
yes, a few less Ferrero Rocher, but but still very enjoyable.
So, how long have you been into board games for then?
Oh, a long time. I mean, I've always enjoyed board games since I was very small. My mum and dad liked board games, just traditional family games, but we played them. And then when I discovered Dungeons and Dragons when I was maybe 12 or 13, the whole world of hobby board games just opened up in front of me like a bounteous vista, and I took it from there, really.
Oh, wicked. Well, I set you up, but do you have a scenario for us today?
Well, I wanted to come up with something that had some vague real-world connotations, something that listeners could actually perhaps use one day to escape from a real-world situation. So what I was thinking of is, where do people commonly trot out the idea of board games? It's to try and save themselves from a particularly dreary or politically embarrassing dinner party conversation.
Sure.
So that's what we're up to today.
Ah.
And who are the guests at this politically difficult situation?
Well, everyone says they have a racist uncle.
Okay.
My uncle was lovely.
Yep.
I hasten to add by that, actually. But let's imagine, you've got that friend from Facebook or that elderly relative here who's perhaps parted ways from you since you were at school and is now steering the conversation in awkward directions.
Is this sort of like a Christmas situation where you've been forced to meet up?
Yeah, I was going to say, how did you even get into that situation? Because if there's anything I'm good at, it's avoiding being in close contact situations with people that I don't like.
Well, that's what Christmas is all about. Being
love my
forced into
family.
close quarters with people you don't necessarily want to talk to.
I always felt like really odd because there's this kind of common idea that people don't like being with their family at Christmas, but I love being with my family at Christmas. It's all very wholesome and nice. So, yeah.
It's nice to know that exists in the world.
Yeah,
It's very
maybe-
pure and wholesome.
And it's not just because like we don't like some, we just cut them out.
Oh my God, you're like the Harfots. You just leave them behind.
No,
Keep
but
on
it's just-
trucking.
If you can't carry your wagon.
To be fair, none of my family like playing board games. So I grew up really loving board games. And none of my family were prepared to play them other than at Christmas.
Oh, that's
when
your
they
time to
deigned to let
shine.
me play or play with me Monopoly, which obviously I think is known. You're not the biggest fan of Monopoly, but it would
do
do
with what you can get,
It
right?
would do. Yeah, I'll take what I can get in those situations. But yeah, anyway, I digress.
No, it's interesting because Monopoly is such a whipping boy, when it comes to board conversations. And controversially, I don't think it's that bad.
Oh, I don't.
I'd take it over nothing.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a decent game. It's just not one of my favorites, and I wouldn't ever want to play it again unless there was like kind of a really big twist on it. I know that Monopoly is probably the biggest guilty party in trying new things, isn't it? Like, have you seen how many variants they've got?
Oh my
Monopoly
God,
Cheaters
yeah.
Edition, Monopoly Gamer,
Monopoly Deal.
Yeah, there's so many, and so I have to give it credit for that it has at least attempted to try and break out of the formula and try new stuff.
But are you sure that's not just because they've gone, oh, we have a great IP, everybody knows Monopoly, so we're going to bring out another thing that's
They have
instantly
a
going to sell.
monopoly on
Exactly.
Monopoly.
But the thing is, they've already done that. If you think of a brand or a city or anything, like they've created those versions of it. So yes, it's very guilty of abusing its IP and just putting it out everywhere. But they at least tried new stuff as well as that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
they could have just stuck another Stranger Things Monopoly or like Rick and Morty Monopoly, which they've done.
I'm sure they
by the
have
way.
done all those things.
But they just ran out of IPs and like, we need to do something else. I would love to know how many editions of Monopoly exist out there.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, that'd be a good trivia question.
I presume it would also be like localized. Like, we won't know all the ones that are French Monopoly. I
Oh,
assume
of
that
course, yeah. There must be hundreds that are like
anyone that has a city or a town over, I don't know, 200,000 people probably has a Monopoly version.
You know,
that's
you know how
mind-blowing.
people get into collecting, and you think board game would be an impossible thing to get into collecting wise, because just know there's some that are out of print, and it would be almost impossible to get every board game that's ever been made. But I wonder if that's achievable with Monopoly.
Oh, I'm sure there is someone who owns every edition ever made. There's like a fanatical Monopoly fan out there. But what if there was let's take this to the next level. Let's say, could you make a game about making monopolies. Do you know what I mean?
Get super meta.
Well, there is actually a game coming out. I think the Kickstarter's running sometime fairly soon from James Naylor, who did Magnate. I don't know if
Oh,
people
yes.
know. Yeah. And I can't remember what it is called now, which is bad, but it was originally called Board Games, the Board Game, brackets, the Card
Yes.
Game.
The annoying thing is, I'm pretty sure I know the new name. It's in here somewhere, but it's not coming to the because he changed it.
He
during
did,
development.
yes. But it's exactly what you're saying. In some ways, not Monopoly, not focused on Monopoly, but it is a board game about the development cycle.
Oh, it was only a matter of time before that happened.
Yes.
Because I'm sure everyone who's really into board games has thought about or prototyped their own board game or card game at some point.
I mean, there's Essen, the convention is like, it's a really big, it's somewhat of a mecca sometimes. If you're into hobbyist of board games and you want to go to a convention, you've probably heard of Essen. But there's like a board game of Essen where you're going around shopping and various other bits.
But you have to lay out all the different stalls and like...
It has its own little map. I think it was like maybe taken of a snapshot of one time in Essen.
Right.
It's I looked at it about playing it and I was like, this is kind of cool.
Just because it would be bothering me if I was sitting watching. I think the game's called Game Jam. I'm
Okay,
not
thank you.
100% on that, but I think it's called Game Jam. But I don't know, might be wrong. Sorry,
Alright.
James.
I'm sure you'll go back, have a Google for it, and then put it in the comments.
Yes, I will. I will.
I
do
think
that.
we've given people enough information to find it if they need to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
just
the key
type
thing.
in board game, the board game, the board game 6 times into Google.
Doesn't that summon Candyman? Or Meeple Man?
Google does have that thing, right? Where wherever you type in things, sometimes you'll type in like Space Invaders, and then it'll come up with Space Invaders. That
Oh
you
yeah,
can
there's
kind
some
of play
Easter eggs
immediately.
in there.
Yeah, right.
Oh wow, yeah. If you do type Candyman 3 times into Google, there's like a jump scare come up on the screen to get you.
So back to this scenario. We've got a racist uncle. How many people are we playing this board game with?
Well, let's say 6. 6 is a
6
good number.
people.
It's a good number for dinner party, and it's a good number for a board game. Sort of like,
That keeps a lot of options open.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed a lot of modern board games seem to cap it at 4 increasingly. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's some balance thing, but we'll go with 6. 4 would be
I
pretty
would guess
dull.
it's playtime.
Maybe.
I think a lot of people don't want to make like a 2 to 3 hour board
Yeah.
game. They want to say it's a 1 or 2 hour game, and it's really hard to pull that off with 6 people.
I think a lot of people want to make a 3-hour board game, but the publishers are like, please make it quicker than that.
It's not going to sell.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
That every minute probably reduces the audience by like 5%, you know?
I think there is a definite sweet spot because I find with games that are like really short, it's like junk food. You know, it's a throwaway. It doesn't satisfy, and there's a sense of epicness that you get from a game that verges into the 2 hour plus territory that you just don't get. You know, it feels like a moment. It feels like you've achieved something if you've won, or taken part in something meaningful if you've lost. You know,
Yeah,
so
it sticks with you, doesn't it? A playthrough
yes,
of like a 3 hour game. You
Yeah.
remember the ups and downs more than just, oh yeah, we played 5 rounds of this 20-minute game, and I guess I
Yeah.
had fun.
yeah.
I swore it would never happen when I was younger, but I'm getting increasingly more and more difficult at getting these games to the table because I'm just
yeah.
like, I don't have the time. Who's learned the rules? No one's learned the rules. Well, I'm not going to learn the rules immediately right now. Let's just play small things. Oh, it's an hour and a half later. Now you have to leave. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's true.
This is why 2 to 3 hour games just in that sweet spot. I think that's
Yeah.
So what are some of your favourite go-to longer games?
The thing is that increasingly, as you say, I don't have time for longer games. Some games recently that I have brought to the table that I've really enjoyed are the new edition of Pax Pamir. That's very, very good.
Yes.
That will wrap in 2 to 3 hours, I think, fairly regularly. I've played Wonderland's War. That's quite good.
yeah.
That's a new game that's come out a couple of months ago. It's one of the best ones I've seen this year. Really nice combination of kind of like area control and
Bag building?
Bag building, yes, that's one. I really do quite like the whole deck building, bag building thing when it is attached to a board. Just the cards, no, I'll give that a pass. But when there's something spatial to do with it as well, you know, I really enjoy those.
How did the racist uncle get invited to a group of 6 people? Are there other people
It's
in this?
Christmas. You have to invite the racist uncle. It's tradition.
But presumably it's like maybe you, maybe your partner, maybe a kid or two, and then racist uncle. He's like, how did he get invited to this? If it was like 20, 25 people, maybe I'd be, it'd be fine.
Well, if you want me to get you to recommend board games for 20 to 25 people, if you want me to put that,
True,
that
okay.
kibosh
I'll be
on
shooting
the
myself in
podcast.
the- my own
Shotgun
foot.
2 rooms and a boom.
Maybe he's just recently got into Facebook memes, and he didn't used to be this racist.
that's terrifyingly plausible, to be honest.
Just, I had to explain to my mother that when you share the Facebook, I don't give Facebook permission. Recently, I was like, Mum, that's not a thing. And she was just like, well, I was doing it just to be safe. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that I feel so bad. It's like, honestly.
I think that's the kind of person I'd be worried about inviting to a dinner party.
Yeah, so maybe my mum's a few years away from this situation. And I can't not invite her to Christmas.
Or if you did, it'd be very awkward. But then again, like that's the kind of situation for which it is awkward. Oh, if you embarrass or you snub someone, at Christmas it's going to be really awkward. But if that's the situation, you're snubbing them, then you're scot-free, right?
Exactly.
That's how it works.
It's fine. We're good for the rest of the year. There'll be insults for the whole of the time. It'll be okay. We won't get any contact from them. Okay, so we've got 6 people. Are we mixture of ages?
Yep, definitely. I think that goes without saying, given the scenario.
Yep.
How old is the youngest?
Well, I see. I'm tempted to go with my family, even though I don't have any relatives. I'm veering to dangerously personal territory here. So we'll go with the age of my youngest, which is 12.
Okay.
Okay.
So they've got some. I mean, I'm imagining that growing up in your family, they're probably introduced to board games.
Yes.
So
yes,
they're 12, but really, it's a fair game on pretty much any board game.
Well, other than sort of like Campaign for North Africa, probably yes.
Yeah, we never recommended that game.
Yeah, what psychopath would recommend that?
Yeah.
So I'm curious because I've always thought that if I was to have kids, I would definitely try and push them into playing board games. But I think that because there's such a grand, variety of board games out there, and I feel like there is something for everybody, I don't think it would be a problem to get them into board games. It's the same. I might have said this before, but it's like when people say, "Oh, I don't like movies." Who says that? People say, "I don't like horror movies," or "I don't like big blockbuster movies," but they'll like the niche things. And I feel like that's the same with board games. So I've always thought it would be easier to get sort of kids into board games. How did you find it? I mean, did you feel like you were? I mean, I love this hobby so much, but do I really want to push this on my kids, or do you feel like they took to it quite well?
I've been very careful not to push it on my kids because I know it's not something that everybody enjoys. I think there's definitely a strain of thought that thinks that board games are like work. It's like doing a spreadsheet all day and then you come home and do more spreadsheets, and that's fine. Everybody likes their own things. I don't really necessarily believe that it is for everybody. I mean, everybody should have a go, but not everyone's going to take to it. So no, I haven't pushed it very hard. But at the same time, it's something that kids take to very naturally. Play is very natural to them. I can remember introducing them to Dungeons and Dragons when they were far too young to properly understand the rules. But the idea of playing a fantasy character is something they did every day in the playground with their friends at school. It was completely normal. And likewise, when I remember a particular game when I was playtesting a war game, a Napoleonic war game with all the little chits on the counter, and it had portraits of like Wellington and Napoleon and so on the counter, and I'd left it out, and I came in to find my kids had borrowed the counters because they liked when the faces on, and they were playing like a Candyland style board game from a magazine, sort of like Wellington and Napoleon
running around collecting gumdrops.
That's right, yeah, exactly. So it's just very natural to them, and some games that they really enjoyed when they were younger, King of Tokyo, they took to very easily. We've had lots of great time to King of Tokyo. They liked some of the cooperative adventure games, the Dungeons and Dragons adventure system games, like Castle Ravenloft and Legend of Drizzt. They really, really enjoyed because I could guide them a little bit. I wasn't really a games master because we were cooperating in the game, but it's a really good way where you can just kind of tell them the rules they need to know and let them get on with it, and then introduce it gradually. So there are games for everybody, and it's surprising what you can get away with, especially in cooperative games, in terms of getting younger kids to play them. Definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. My boy, I played Root with my wife, but we let the boy play, even though he's a bit young for Root. It's quite a complicated game, but I just let him be the vagabond. And he was just having fun running around in the woods, randomly stabbing cats and looking for treasure, while, my wife and I were having like this massive war against each other. And he was just having fun being there and being involved. And he didn't need to know all the rules and why we were doing what we were doing. It worked great. And then afterwards he was like, "Can you leave it all set up?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he was just then playing his own make-believe game with all the pieces.
Oh, cool.
So
I
it's sort of
totally
best of both
get it
worlds,
because
really.
those meeples in that game are fantastic.
They're very
They've got
cute.
so much character for just a few lines. It's really good.
Gone are the days of just square wooden tokens.
Yeah,
No.
cubes.
Sorry, you're right. I've been well reprimanded there.
Wow.
Wow.
But they are such visually appealing things, you know. This is a key part of the appeal of board games, and kids love the toy factor, you know, and they do look cool. But it's quite interesting what you're saying there about that, about somebody just doing their own thing en route with the Vagabond, because I found I have other times where kids haven't quite understood the rules almost, or haven't quite understood the the scenario of the game. They've actually proved to be quite interesting because it turns things on its head and makes you look at a game with fresh eyes. I remember particularly one New Year's Eve, I was at a friend's house playing Battlestar Galactica. This is some years ago. And his kids were young teens at the time. And one of the players... we all thought was a Cylon. So I was a human. We were convinced this player was a Cylon. So we played, accordingly, chucked him in the brig. I can't remember the details now. At the end of the game, we lost, with the Battlestar went down in flames, we all died. And they revealed that they were in fact human. And they'd been playing as a Cylon because they thought it was more fun. and at first, I was like, momentarily, I was actually quite angry. Oh my God, you've sabotaged the whole game.
You've been playing wrong.
Exactly. And the more I thought about it then, it's like, actually, that was a really cool experience. That was a really interesting take on the game. I had a great time, even though it was not... I didn't win, and it wasn't played the way I expected it to. It didn't devalue the experience. In fact, quite the opposite. It was fun and unusual, and I will remember that, for the rest of my life. And
It's
it
a
was cool.
story you can bring up when you appear on podcasts.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's exactly why I did it. I predicted this.
That is one of the best things about something like Battlestar Galactica, where it is a hard game, and even if everyone plays "quote unquote" correctly, you can still lose.
Yes.
But it's not about winning or losing that game. That game is very much about the story that develops over the course of the game, and the highs and the lows, and the lies and the mistakes. And I don't remember how many games of that I've won or lost. I just remember the experiences. And that's so hard. And a lot of games don't have that.
No.
I definitely remember the times I've lost that game to some bloody Cylons.
I tend to find games nowadays where I don't really necessarily care about winning or losing. I just care about playing my best game. And to a certain extent, like if it's an engine builder or something like that, or like a bag builder or a deck builder or whatever, I just kind of like, I think this is a really interesting way. I wonder if I can do well doing this own thing. So I tend to find that to be like a thing in my head. So when you're talking about whether you win or lose, you would care about these experiences, I think you're right. I just care about playing the game, enjoying it, having fun with other people, and not getting too bogged down.
I had this conversation with some friends recently, and I keep bringing it up, and I swear I'm right, but we'll see. The whole idea of like wanting to win is important. It's an important factor. If everybody in a game wants to win, that's the optimal way to play a game. Because without that, if somebody is just not contributing to the overall sort of like, I wouldn't say economy of the game, it might not be the right term, but if nobody is doing that, then you're kind of not playing the game the way it's supposed to be played, right? So there is an element of like wanting to win being important, but how important that is. And obviously if you're trying a new strategy, as long as you are still with the goal, like I should be trying to win here, like how do you feel about that? Because
it depends on the game, because in some games it can be very frustrating. Like you say, with the internal economy, if someone is like, I don't know, let's say, for example, Agricola, someone's just taking all the wood and not actually using it, or they have, I don't know, like, or someone's like letting someone else keep first player. Someone else has an opportunity to stop someone winning, but they don't take it. Do you know what I mean? Like where it kind of, the game kind of mechanically falls apart if everyone's not acting in the same way. It's a hard one to explain without specific examples.
Some games, for example, require a player balancing element to it. And Catan is a good example, right? If you are in the lead in Catan, other players should not be trading with you, or at least not giving you favorable trades, because that is a way to kind of offset that player being in the lead.
Yeah. Otherwise, they can snowball to victory with nothing to keep them in check.
And obviously there is luck in that, so it might not matter. But if you are not trying to, if you're trying to if you're not trying to prevent that player from winning, then that player is going to have an easier time of winning. Playing the game and probably going to win. And so in that game, if the other players aren't actually trying to do that, it does impact the game. And that's just an example. But any game with a player balancing element to it, that's the kind of games where it's more of a problem if people aren't trying to win or...
Well, especially in games with fixed setup. So I don't know if you've ever played either Chaos in the Old World or the Game of Thrones board game with the fixed deployment. And you run into big problems where, like, if Greyjoys don't attack Lannisters, then Lannisters are going to attack Baratheons. And what one player decides to do in that game has several knock-on effects on what all the other players can do. And there's like what you should be doing. And I've actually found that I can't enjoy playing those games anymore now because they feel so predetermined, and I don't want to get into a position where I'm like, no, you're playing Greyjoys, you have to attack Lannisters, otherwise the Starks will do this, and that sucks. That's
brought up like a real sore point for me. For Game of Thrones, I think it was just as before we started opening the cafe, I had I have 5 friends, so we had 6 people around the table. I had to come up with something that we could all play, and I was like, I've heard of this Game of Thrones game, let's play this game. And we had the same situation where it was a couple who were Dawn and basically they were both on the south area, and they just slowly helped themselves and worked themselves up. And like for so long I was so frustrated about this, and I've done the same thing as you. I've gone, I can no longer play these games unless I know we have these kind of mutual rules that's
this
going
sort of
on.
established meta of like optimal play, but then are you just playing by like flowchart at that point? I don't know. It's like
but essentially they were playing and they were having fun, and I have to remember that fundamentally, if you're playing a board game, you're playing with kids or you're playing with anyone, you just need to have fun. So it is about the journey, and I think it's such a learning experience for me, even though I look back at that time and I was just like, I got really annoyed because they then started talking like German to each other, and so there wasn't even this like conversations. And then I later played like Twilight Imperium, and there was a conversation going on under the table on WhatsApp, etc. And I was just like, what is this game? So I've learned that you know what, those games are probably not for me, and secondly, I've just realized that it has to be, I've got to just play what I want to play, and then we'll work on that experience. And I don't want to force that on anyone else. I just want to know going into it that I'll be like, if I want a really hardcore board gamey game, I'm going to invite these people. If I want to just have fun for an evening, not that you can't have fun the other way.
No, but I think it's what you're expecting going in. If you know it's going to be this cutthroat diplomatic like secret message game, if you're mentally prepared for that and that's what you want to do that time, then that's great. But if you think you're just going to be doing dudes on a map, and then suddenly it turns into this like cutthroat political wheeler dealer situation, then because in that situation, the moment you realise that those two were going to be in a permanent alliance, all the other players should have, formed a coalition against them. But that's really hard to achieve when you're not expecting it.
Exactly. So is this the kind of board game that we have to expect the racist uncle to want to play or not to play?
So we're now recommending Game of Thrones for a family Christmas gathering.
That way you can all gang up on one person. This is
to
great,
teach
right?
them a lesson.
Exactly.
There's a hidden message here. Can you work it out?
Ooh, I wonder. Yes.
Yikes. So,
what games don't you like? I imagine you've played many stinkers in your experience.
Well, actually, no. I mean, I think that board games, unlike video games, I think this is a key difference, is that there are very few and far between bad board games. Because when you sit down and play a bad board game, it's normally really obvious. There are a lot, far too many, and this is a whole subject area, of mediocre board games that are fun, but immediately forgettable. We are drowning in those, essentially. But I genuinely think bad board games are quite rare. But nothing. No, nothing. It's, I was only thinking about games that I haven't enjoyed, and that's more of a taste thing. But generally there are very few games that I've strongly disliked. I think most of those that I've taken against particularly tend to be longer, heavier, more complex Eurogames. The stuff right at the top of the sort of like the strategy and complexity tree. I'll tolerate a lot of complexity in a more interactive game, but the poster child I'm thinking of particularly here is Le Havre, a game which I really, really dislike.
It's one of Dice Tower Tom Vassel's favourite games.
I don't care.
Yeah, no, it's just funny to see the disparity between someone's favourite game and yours is no, it's the worst.
Yeah,
it's funny.
But I took against it so much, to be honest, that it just put me off that whole genre. I have not played many games of that style since. But other than that, I'm fairly open. I like games. I like the activity of play. I like the challenge and the interactivity of it. The other thing really fundamentally, part of that is the player interaction thing. Mm-hmm. So another genre of games I suppose I don't like very much is a particular style of cooperative game. I can very much see the appeal of them, unlike your longer Euro games, but they're not for me. The ones where you've got what people tend to call an alpha player or a quarterback player, where there's that potential for one person to drive the whole thing.
That can be frustrating.
Yeah, and I do tend to think those games are more common than people think. I would absolutely include Pandemic in that, for example, despite its raucous popularity.
You just know who is going to be the alpha player in this group, don't you? It's the uncle.
But it's very hard for the person teaching the game to not accidentally slip into that role.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is exactly it. I started out when people talked about cooperative games that they didn't seem cooperative to me at all, because one person kind of going, no, you move here, you move there, and that's not cooperative. That's just following instructions. And the key problem is people say, well, you need better friends, or you need less bossy friends, or less racist uncles, or whatever. But the problem with it is that everyone's incentivized to follow the instructions because you can make a logical argument. It's a strategy game. You can make a logical argument to say, yeah, clearly you want to do this because you don't want there to be an explosion of infections around Tokyo or something. So everybody goes, oh yeah, actually we will do this because clearly it's the most sensible thing to do. So there's not enough uncertainty in a lot of them, really.
Well, that's why Battlestar Galactica works so well, because it's essentially Pandemic with a secret traitor, and so you never know if someone's just pouring honey in your ear and trying to get you to do the worst thing imaginable.
No, I agree. I struggle with these kinds of games, but we've recommended before Spirit Island quite a lot because there's
I do love Spirit Island just because the sheer complexity of it means that you can barely understand what you're doing, let alone, oh, hang on, your thing works completely differently, but I'm going to try and tell you how to play your character. Yeah. I think the completely different system for each player really minimizes the quarterbacking.
I can't remember if I've been on the podcast when you've recommended that, but I'm going to say I'm not a huge fan of that game. It is way on the complex end of games, and I love complicated games. That doesn't put me off at all. I know you were saying earlier on about, does anyone know the rules? No, we won't be learning this today. I'm so strange in that I love learning new rules. I guess that goes with the role of being at the cafe, being head of games. Yeah,
That's why I employ everybody. So every time I come in, I can be like, can someone teach me all the game rules, please?
But I love teaching, rules games as well, because it's almost. I know that the rule book is there and it's kind of supposed to do that job for you, but I love optimizing how to teach a game and what's important, when to bring these things up and how to do that. So I love that. But yeah, Spirit Island
ask people to give you a feedback form at the end, being like, can you just tell me what I can improve on this teach, please?
I know I'm doing a good job. I don't need feedback. You don't get to this position without being pretty good at teaching games. I'm kidding. I'm not that arrogant, I swear. No, but I found Spirit Island, I just didn't have a good time with the learning of the game, and there's so much to sort of work out in terms of looking at the board and knowing what's going to happen, and then just the way the cards it just doesn't have I was so excited to play it, but then it just fell flat for me. So I'm sorry, Ben.
No. Well, everyone likes different things, and that's fine. I think I got into it. Someone taught me how to play it. I didn't have to learn myself, and I think that would have been harder for sure.
Someone taught me, and it's actually someone someone I live with now. So yeah, sorry.
I have an interesting question, because you obviously seem very pragmatic about your board game choices, that you almost see them on a slightly different level. What do you think of the Board Game Geek like top 100 list kind of thing? Do you feel that reflects good quality board games? Do you think there's a sort of an element of hotness in it? What do you find any of the board games you actually like in the upper echelons of it?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, I have played most of them. Some of them, absolutely, I agree with. Some of them, I disagree with. There are two big problems with that, taking that as sort of like a yardstick. One of which is it's become quite slow.
Right.
It's taken. I can remember back in the day when games like Twilight Struggle and Agricola suddenly like bubbled to the top. Yeah. That was quite a fast process. Back then,
I do remember like Puerto Rico being there for like 6 months.
It was, but what I mean is when Agricola came out, got a lot of buzz. Within about 6 months, I think, it had come from almost nothing to being close to the top, if not the top. I mean, I don't remember the stats exactly, but it was quite a quick process. Whereas now, if you look at that, there are very few games for the last couple of years in there, because simply... partly because of the volume of releases, I think. It's taking much longer for games to come to the top. So I don't think it's almost hotness proof. It's almost anti-hotness. That actual
it's like the
100.
establishment.
Yes. And the other problem is that it's aligned very heavily with the Board Game Geek user taste, which is not, I don't think, aligned to the wider board gaming taste. Increasingly, slowly, perhaps it's becoming so. But
there
definitely,
definitely biased towards more complex games,
and more complex Euro games. I hesitate to call them Germanic games, because I think that style is gone. That's something that was popular in the 90s, around about the 2000s. I think it's different now. Some of those shibboleths that came with games like, I don't know, Ra and High Society have gone through the window. But it's definitely skewed toward the hobby end of the spectrum.
I feel like such a shame, because some of the best examples of game design can be found in like games with very simple rules. There's like a genius, like a beautiful simplicity to it. I just use an example of one of my favorite sort of party style games being like Just One, and even that, it came out quite late, fairly recently in the board game scene, and yet it's a really clever game, and you just can't believe that a game like that didn't exist before, and someone just found this like beautiful game in it, and it's very easy to teach. You can teach it in like 2 minutes, and that's great, but it would never get to the top of the list, because there's this, as you said, like an anti fun party light filler gateway game kind of bias on the Board Game Geek. So yeah, it's kind of a flawed system in that, because people can't appreciate a game just because it's got fewer rules. And
I think it's a shame it's like really the only place people look, because I think it's very useful for what it is. If you go in going, what's the hot sort of heavy Euro board game right now, then it's a great resource. But if you're looking at it for all board games, then it's going to fall short.
Do you guys use that? Because I find myself not actually using that top 100 at all.
I used to, but now I see so many games get overhyped. I think it's when Gloomhaven became the hottest thing of all time, and I personally didn't enjoy Gloomhaven, that I realised people really love shiny miniatures and big Kickstarters, and it's got very little at this point to do with actual gameplay and more to do with hype and flash. And that's when I stopped caring so much about it.
Interesting, because I love that game, but I don't really care about miniatures, don't really care about Kickstarters at all, but I just love the game itself. So it's kind of funny you say that.
It's an interesting one. I similar to you. I think when I got into board games and, hotness had a more of a importance to me, that's when I cared more about it. I honestly don't see that much, other than to see my beloved Terraforming Mars slowly decrease down the rating, as it were.
So you're just
the
like
Twilight struggle of Terraforming Mars staying in the top 100.
No, yeah. Beyond that, but Gloomhaven. I know I've talked about it before, but it recently it was free on Epic Games as a digital edition of it. So I was like, finally, I can give it its due. I've played the board game before, and I owned it, I then sold it on and all the rest of it. But I thought, like, digital edition, it has to be the creme de la creme, basically, because it felt like it was a board game that was designed there was actually like a computer game.
Yeah, because the sort of bookkeeping is the worst part of the game,
Exactly.
and so automating that is a huge improvement.
Yeah.
You're always going to forget to like wane some energy. That's that's it.
Or there's a deck you didn't reshuffle, or a card you meant to put in and didn't, or whatever.
Turns out I didn't like it on digital either, so I stand by that. I'm just not a big Gloomhaven fan. It's just not for me.
I actually really like Gloomhaven, but I eventually got rid of my copy because, and I think it's relevant that compare what you're saying. I think Jaws of the Lion is better.
Oh, cool.
Because it is, it's this slimmed down version. It isn't packed with miniatures. It isn't packed with stuff. It has much less bookkeeping. They used to say, they still do say that Gloomhaven's got like 100 hours of playtime in it. Who has 100 hours of tabletop board game time with the same
And how
group?
much of that is building maps and shuffling
Yes,
decks?
exactly.
60, 70 hours?
Yes.
100 hours of playtime with 3 hours of it's 300 hours of setup or something like that.
I'm searching through the box for individual cardboard components to put on the map, whereas Jaws of the Lion, you got the flip
Yeah,
maps.
you just got the book
So much
pre-made.
easier. You can just get in there and play, and I found it so much more approachable for people. And it's got a scenario-based tutorial, so it makes it easier to teach to people. And I think the core system of Gloomhaven is really solid. Actually, to go back to what you're saying about cooperative games, I think it's really interesting. I think personally, what cooperative games really need is an element of uncertainty in the player base. Because if you put a lot of variety in the game itself, a lot of dice, a lot of cards or whatever, I mean, that can be lots of fun. Arkham Horror, the original second edition, Arkham Horror is a good example. There's tons of stuff in there. It's really exciting, really fun to play. But you wonder how much strategy there is. You wonder how much your decisions are actually impacting the game. So I tend to go for co-ops that have some information where it's hidden, or there's players that leave players pulling in different directions.
Yeah.
That's what they really needed. And Gloomhaven is the ultimate example of that, because everybody wants their own treasure.
Yeah.
To spend it. The key thing in Gloomhaven is you're not allowed to share treasure. And so there are so many examples where the party's going to you, no, come on, play a card to take out that last bandit or whatever, and you're thinking, yeah, but I could capture a few gold pieces from my back pocket. And I love that about it.
Your
It's
secret
great.
mission as well
Yes,
is great.
yeah.
Actually, if I want to level up, I've got to be the first to open the door. So
Yeah,
I'm just going to go do it and let all the monsters in.
Yeah.
They're not actually in. They're not actually in Jaws of the Lion, which
they
is a
not?
bit of a shame.
Oh,
No,
okay.
but
That's
Wait,
a
no,
shame.
in Jaws of the Lion,
Yeah.
the battle goals, they are there.
But they're not. They're not secret, are they? You're talking about the character
In the original
ones.
game, you have those
Oh,
things where you're
that
like,
one.
if I...
Oh, no,
they're both.
you're talking about battle
You
goals.
have the personal...
The battle goals, which are the ones that you say defeat a monster with in one go and stuff like
end
that.
the game
gives you
under
tips.
5 health or something.
But then you're
like
talking
that.
about your personal goal. Which,
I was actually talking about the battle.
yeah,
goals.
sorry,
sorry,
but
I
you're talking about the
misunderstood.
personal
Yeah,
goal. Yeah.
But you also have the personal quests as well. Yeah.
I am known in my group of Gloomhaven for being the treasure chest guy. I will never leave one unopened, and it's kind of funny because I basically got all of the treasure chests, and there was one scenario where there was 2 treasure chests, and I didn't get one, and my friend beat me to it and did a haha, and then he opened up the book and checked what it was, and it was a poison trap. And I was like, well, there we go.
What you get.
Yeah.
That's what you get when you mess with the treasure warrior.
It's exactly what makes cooperative games worth playing. That's cooperation,
Yeah.
or lack of it. That's what makes them fun.
I think I just have so many moments like that in Gloomhaven. But yeah, I'm really excited about Frosthaven as well. Going back to the scenario, I know we've kind of not really talked about it that much on this, but it's been great. But in terms of what is your overall goal for this game, what do you want the goal to do? Do you want it to sort of create a level of harmony between the group, or is it just a way to sort of distract?
I given what I've said about how I feel about cooperative games and interactive games, it can't be harmony. It can't be harmony if I'm going to play it. Absolutely not. Harmony is the last thing I want around a board game table. Definitely distraction. So we're thinking either it's got to enliven a very dull conversation or get us away from topics that we really don't want to be talking about.
Okay.
Cool. Let's recommend some board games. Does anybody have a yearn to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So obviously 6 players. I thought, you said something about being, I think cooperative games, we recommend them a lot. It's kind of like our go-to theme, but I think it's important in this context because you said, I think even though you said, you've got these different groups of people, and there's probably people of different skill levels and stuff. I wanted a game that is immediately playable and understandable, but there is like that element of you can argue over stuff, but you are ultimately trying to achieve the same goal. The game is called Last Message. So this is a really clever game. Essentially, one of you has been, I can't remember the setup to it, but one of you has been either or seen someone committing a crime or something, and basically you can't speak, but you can draw. Okay, and the way that you're going to give the other player's clue is in the form of drawing, or like writing or drawing on this board, which is like a grid of 3x3, so it's split up into like 9 squares. What you're trying to do is at the beginning of the game, you're going to select somebody on this kind of drawings, and there's multiple drawings in the game, which is just like a scene. If you think of like Where's Wally, you know how they've got a scene with like loads of sort of similar looking people, and you need to pick one person, and that's the one that you need to try and give the information towards. Now there's another player, so you're working towards the goal of trying to get your teammates on the other side of this sort of screen. You're trying to get them to guess the correct person, but there's somebody sitting next to you and they're working against you. So you've got a certain amount of time, I think it's 30 seconds, to give as much information by writing on this kind of whiteboard kind of grid, like it clues to direct them towards the right person, right? However, after you're done, each round, the player who is working against you gets to rub off a certain number of those squares before you get to show that board to the other players. So let's say you've written, the person was wearing like a green hat. So you might write green hat on it, but then the player, before they get to show it to you, they might rub out the bit that says green. And so they only get to see hat. Or you might draw, like in the scene, you might draw a specific geographical feature that's like, hey, it's there. Or maybe you put west down. So you're trying to give all these clues, but then the other player is going to eliminate some of it, and it's not going to make much sense. So you then get to present that message, the like partially erased one, to the other players, and they're going to try and figure out which of these people now is the guilty party based on this sort of like partial information. And there's a lot of discussion about at this point where, what do we think that means? Oh, maybe there's part of a word here. Maybe that meant west, but you can see the S and the T. Maybe it's east instead. So there's all of like trying to decipher exactly what the player meant when they're drawing. So after, I think it's like 3 or 4 rounds, each round the player gets to eliminate less of the board. So I think in the first round they get to eliminate 5 or 6 squares, so you are literally not working with much at all. But then in the next round they only get to erase starting with a fresh board again, and then they get to erase like only 4 this time, and then the next round they only get to eliminate 3. So you are going to get closer and closer to the right goal, and you're going to have more information to work with. But ultimately it's just a fun, light, silly kind of game, which is cooperative to a degree, because you have got that one person who's working against it. Maybe that could be the uncle, put him in a position where he's like, he is going to get his like angry moments out, but he can't do anything other than just erase stuff on the board. And don't give him the pen, right? But that's the game, Last Message. Does that make sense? I hope I made that kind of clear. It makes sense.
Yeah, I haven't played it. I must say that's new to me.
Yeah,
but I can see the reasoning.
Yeah,
I'm going to wait to hear what everybody else suggests.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I'm probably going to recommend something a little heavier than is appropriate, but that's my wheelhouse. So that's what I do. I'm going to recommend Captain Sonar, which I don't know if you're familiar with.
I'm not. No, these are both games I've not played.
So this is a game that's obviously inspired by battleships, but takes it much further.
How can we add more rules?
So it's the idea is it's 2 submarines hunting each other in the ocean. And you split into 2 teams. So in this scenario, it'd be three people on each team, and the game is played in real time. There's no turn taking, and it's a lot of shouting. So essentially, there's each person. It can go up to 8 players, 4 in each submarine, and you each take a specific post. But there are rules for less than 8 players. So everyone has a job to do in the submarine. One person is like sort of navigating, and you have a map, like a battleship's grid, but it also has islands that you can't move through. So you got to navigate your way through the islands. And the navigator is drawing their own path on this like dry whiteboard. And every time they make a move, they have to announce their bearing. They go like north, east, southwest, and they draw their path of the way they're going. And every time they call that out, there's two people listening to them. They've got their engineer on their own team, and every time they make a move, they have to like damage the submarine, and they have to pick. And the more you move, the less systems work, and you can only repair by surfacing. So you've got a limited time, and the engineer's got to manage, okay, well, I guess for now we'll turn the sonar off, and now we'll turn the torpedoes off, and okay, now we've really actually got to surface now. But on the other team, you've got the sonar guy who's listening to the opposition's navigator, and they're drawing all their moves on a piece of perspex that they don't know where the enemy sub started. So they're moving the perspex over the map, and they're going, okay, well, he couldn't have started here because he would have gone through an island by this point. So they're constantly trying to find the position. And when the navigator the sonar guy on the other team is pretty sure they know where the enemy is, they call the weapons officer and they say, I'm pretty sure he's in like D6. Go, go, go. And they're like, okay, torpedo to D6. And then you pause the game, and the other team goes, does it hit you? If it's a direct hit, you take 2 damage. If it's a partial hit, if it was near you, you take 1 damage. And they're like, no, okay, we didn't get you. Go, go, go. And when you surface, you have to announce a certain amount of information. Or the other team can launch like sonar decoys or drones. And they're like, okay, we're launching a drone in Sector B. You have to tell us, it's something along the lines of, you have to give us 2 coordinates, like a letter and a number, and one of them has to be true, but we don't know which one. So there's a lot of deduction going on. There's a lot of like logic, but it's all quite frantic because as you're working it out, the sub is still moving. They're still calling out headings, and occasionally they'll have to stop to repair the sub. And when you repair it, every member of the crew has to rub it out and draw a circle, and it's like a time wasting process to give the other team a chance to be like, okay, we've got to move. We know exactly where they are because they've surfaced, and can they get their little job done before they get torpedoed?
Tiny mini game as well, where they have to draw the lines, and it has to be within, and then they've got to do it, and you've got 4 of those to do, and you have to pass it down. You're all just like, draw a line. You know how to do this. Get it within the lines. And then you have to pass it to the other team, and they have to
check it off and be like, you've done that correctly.
Yeah. I have played similar games like that. Similar games like Space Alert and Space Cadet. They also got space.
Those games stress me out.
Oh yes, absolutely.
It is a stressful game, and it does require a certain level of like board game competency. I think for a total family member noob who's only played Monopoly, it's probably overwhelming. But I'm going to assume your family is fairly deep into board games. And I think that the lack of turn taking really like makes it quite a frantic, fun party sort of atmosphere, as long as no one's taking it too seriously. It does require you to give both teams cut them some slack, because otherwise it can get quite heated.
yeah. But I remember playing my first game of that, and it was so much fun. It was crazy, and you're just shouting, and you get really into it as well.
You do.
It's probably perfect for a Christmas situation because everyone's just willing to let go, and they've probably had one too many sherries. It's perfect. Well, good. Okay. For the final recommendation, I have it's 2 because I couldn't figure out which one I should recommend. Essentially, in the cafe, we have a favorite board game that we like to play with large groups of people. It's called Hive Mind. However, Big Potato have done a similar-ish game called Herd Mentality. Now, Herd Mentality is it's kind of cleaner, but it feels slightly less gamey. I'll explain what it is in a second. But Hive Mind it's a really weird theme. It's the idea that you're bumblebees and you're in the hive and you slowly get ostracized from the hive every time you get something wrong. And so the whole
racist comment at the dinner table.
So the whole basis of this game is that you're asking questions. So you'll each take it in turns to say 3 things you'd find in the kitchen, for example. And then what will happen is everybody has their own little piece of paper, and on it they'll write the 3 things that they're going to find in the kitchen. So you might be like knife, fork, spoon, apron, blender, something along those lines. And what will happen is you're trying to get the most points, and you get the most points by having the same word as everybody around the table. So you might say fork, and then you'll be like, okay, has anyone else got fork? And you'll ask everyone around, and maybe 3 of you got fork. you get 3 points. So you always get 1 point, even if you're on your own. So this is where in Hive Mind, you do a round of this situation. You go around until everyone's answers has been said, as it were, and then you mark up, see how many you've got, and then you continue going on, as it were, onto the next round and the next round. It can kind of take as long as you want. It's a good way of shimmying the racist uncle into trying. If he wants to win the game, he's got to start thinking about it like other people, or he'll slowly just get ostracized from the group. So I think this is a great metaphor about what's going on. Now, herd mentality is very similar. It has the same sort of like ask questions, and then you have slightly less optionality with it, because with Hive Mind, it's like, here's 5 things that you could ask about, whereas with herd mentality, it's literally 1 question, and you get a pink sheep with it, and the person who gets
Sheep?
a pink
It's
no,
a cow.
not a pink sheep. Well, there you go, it's a pink cow. So what'll happen is you get this like this squeezy toy that gets plonked in front of you if you're the only person in a round to be completely out of sync. If you go in and be like, well, everybody has a blender, this is like a mincer or something, and then no one else has said mincer, then you get this little pink cow, and what'll happen is you're the odd one out. You can't win as long as you have that, and it's basically a point scoring one. So I recommend both of them. If you're on the sort of lighter, you want this squeezy pink cow thing, then go for herd mentality. If you want to, slowly ostracize someone from a beehive, then go for Hive Mind. It's really good. They're both excellent games. They work with 6 players. We've played that quite a lot. It means that you also get to do the asking of questions more frequently, because that's kind of like, that's one of the fun things, right? Is when you're going, oh, what should I ask people? And sometimes you just make it up. You don't even need. You just want the board game, so you can. They have these cute little, talking of like minis, they have cute little like bees that they
Beeples.
just sit on.
Beeples,
exactly. And it's a fun family friendly thing. We've played it with like 20 people, just because you can absolutely do that. It takes a little while to do the scoring, but if most people say spoon, then you're fine.
Yeah, that's like the upper player count on that game, 20. I just decided, like, when did they decide to stop at 20?
Yeah.
21, no, it's no good.
We tried it at a convention. It didn't work. No, so that's my recommendation.
That's a good one.
I guess I'll say Hive Mind, because I have a sweet spot for it. But herd mentality is a solid one. So,
Do you have any questions for us about the games?
No, I think it's quite interesting, because I've not played any of them.
Wow.
So these are all new to me, and which is kind of
was-
makes it fairer,
I was
because
gonna say,
if I'd have played one, I would have perhaps had a preference for it, just because I'm familiar with it. But I'm having to recommend based on what you've given me, so it's much more of a sales pitch.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not the best at selling one. I'm more of like a describing the gameplay. Maybe I can do it again. So this is an amazing game.
So would you want to pick one or rank them?
give us some feedback.
And
Give us
then
your top
just
3.
pick the...
So you can give feedback to Russ on how well he did explaining the game.
I've got a good idea of how all these games work. I think everybody did a good job of explaining the games. I'll go around the table I'll rank them. So I'm afraid my least likely pick is going to be Hive Mind. I've got
I was thought this was a great one. I was like,
I'm not
this in the
saying
bag.
I understand your reason. I'm not saying it's a bad game or anything like that, but my concerns of it are, sounds to me like a game that works better with quite a lot of players, and we've only got 6. And the second thing that I'm thinking about is it sounds quite a lot like Just One. In some respects, and we've played that quite a lot already. That's quite a well-known game.
So what you would say is that if Just One had just come out, you might have played that in this scenario, but you've played it too many times.
Yes.
It was too good.
It was too good. That's what I heard.
Yeah, that's what I heard too.
So yeah, I'm sorry, but it does sound fun. I may well check these games out. Come to the board game cafe, give them a try. My second place, and of course this is obviously going to decide the winner, is Captain Sonar. And to be honest, if I was going to pick a game for myself, I would pick Captain Sonar. It sounds really good fun. I've had a great time playing games like Space Alert. I think real-time games broadly are a bit underused. I've played one recently called Roll and Fight. Vengeance,
Oh, yes.
Roll and Fight, which is I've really been enjoying that. That's on my table at the moment. Family's been having a good time with it. So I would definitely go for that if it was for me. But my big concern for that, I think, as you mentioned, is just teaching it to a potentially wider crowd, including maybe younger kids and older people who might not get it. Obviously, which makes the winner last message.
Yay.
Because I really like the idea. I can't think of another game that does that. I really love the idea of having a communication of some kind, be it words or messages, and then having rubbed it out, you've got to think about how do I stretch this across the grid? How do I make this as eraser proof as possible? And then turning it on its head, the person who's got to do the erasing has to try and think about how they can sabotage it best. And I really like that dynamic. I'm a big fan of games that, of what you might call semi-cooperative games, where some of you are working together, but somebody's working against the group, and so that really appeals to me. And it sounded easy to understand. You explained it well, and I think that would go down very well. Phew, really like that.
I have to big in myself up on the explaining.
Well, congratulations, Ross.
Yeah,
good
nicely
job.
done.
Thanks. I'm happy with that.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a really great game, to be fair. I've played it a couple of times at a convention, and it is fun being in the seat of drawing the thing. You aren't allowed to write the same word twice. I should have probably mentioned that as a rule. But yeah, having to think, like, how can I get as much information into as many squares as possible in 30 seconds or so, and then obviously knowing that some of it's just going to get erased. But it's fun being in that position. It's fun being in the sort of like deducing what they mean, like what did they mean what is that part of? It's just a really good game. So I'm really glad.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out. It sounds really good fun.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's much appreciated.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Where can people find you?
Well, I write all over the place. You can find my articles on IGN. You can find them on Games Radar. You can find them on Dicebreaker, on T3. If you're on social media, I don't do anything really apart from Twitter, which I'm on far too much, where I do far too much politics. Yes, indeed, as well as board games. So be prepared for that. But my tag is MATTTHR, so Matthra.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for watching this. This is actually the season finale, as it were, the end of the season. So be sure to tune in next week to find out who could possibly have won.
Yeah, we'll have a round table next week where we'll get Dickie back in and we'll talk about some of our favourite picks over the season.
Exactly.
And thank you. Make sure that if you're watching the YouTube video, to like and subscribe, and also check out the podcast on the audio form wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you are already listening to the podcast, please leave a 5-star review in-app and tell some friends about it, because that is the best way to grow. If you hate the podcast, that's fine. Why are you still here? And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.